Penguin Random House Audio presents Ramses the Damned, The Reign of Osiris, by Anne Rice and Christopher Rice. Read for you by Katharine Lee Mcewan. Anne and Christopher dedicate this book to the memory of their beloved cousin, Alan Davio, a brilliant artist and cinematographer who was lost to COVID-19. A king's lot, to do good and be damned. Marcus Aurelius. July, 1914. Russia. With hatred for St. Petersburg burning in his heart, Nikolai Vassiliev hurried along the edges of the humid city's narrow canals, following the shadows as he raced to a meeting that would change the world forever. Now that he'd left the city's grand boulevards, he allowed excitement to quicken his steps. On the glittering Nevsky Prospect, he'd passed bejeweled ladies on their way to the opera, battled his desire to sneer at the preening fops who accompanied them like strutting dolls. Curse them all. They thought themselves the proud custodians of Russia's window to the world, but they were germs, agents of Europe's stain, and they'd rewritten the history of this city to fit their delusions of grandeur. Peter the Great had not summoned Petersburg from these swamps as a magician might with his bare hands. He had raged it from them, and at the cost of tens of thousands of lives. And now the magazine editors and the godless artists who gathered here ridiculed those who refused to exalt the city's grotesque seductions as the shimmers thrown off by a nation's crown jewel, exhorted them to take off their Slavophile nappies and embrace its ghastly fusion of Russian and European as something wholly unique and therefore wholly Russian. Curse them, curse their lies, curse their betrayal of the true Muscovite spirit that had risen lion-like to make order out of the ashes left by Mongols, erecting glittering fields of onion-domed temples where before there had been only savagery and death. Russia's window to the world, never. Petersburg was an open wound through which the infection of Europe had poured with terrible speed, weakening all within. Even the feckless and doddering Tsar Nicholas II, who now bowed before Europe's nations like a serf, had retreated from its borders to the palaces at Tsarskoye Selo. And now, as if to make the injustice complete, Europe was on the eve of war. Soon his beloved Russia would be drawn into the storm. A colossus called unjustly into action on behalf of the very Western nations who knew not its true grandeur or its depths, whose liberal democracy sought to weaken the Tsar's connection to God. But in one gloved hand, Nikolai carried a case containing 2 stones that would end this cataclysm for good. They were the key to a more powerful weapon than all the siege cannons of the Germans. He wore another of these stones from his neck, concealed beneath his coat, polished and amber-hued, but still rough-hewn and bearing the marks of the ancient burial site from which it had been recovered. It hung from a gold chain he'd taken care to tuck between the soft linen of his dress shirt and the thicker cotton of his undershirt, so that its miraculous power wouldn't suddenly fire into action against the heat of his flesh. And there was heat in his flesh, to be sure. Some of it called forth by the long draping coat he'd worn on this hot summer night to conceal the stone's hard lump, but also by the heat of excitement and anticipation. If all went as planned, soon Nikolai's father would allow them to act, to unleash the secret they'd guarded for years now, and on behalf of the Russia they loved, the true Russia, the Russia of Moscow, the Russia of Tsars who did not bow miserably before the delusions of the French and the pretensions of the English. Nikolai turned a corner, and at last the spire of the Peter and Paul Cathedral came into view, rising across a river of black water that seemed unnaturally still and mirror-like on this summer night. Its gilded cupola shined, crowned by an angel. A fitting meeting place, this one, but a stone's throw from the old garrison that had given this city its one true meaning before Peter the Great had fallen prey to the delusion of 1,000 European artificers. Great Tsars who had truly embodied Russia's strength, were buried within, and it was for their ghosts that Nikolai did this now. He saw the shadows he was hoping for before he crossed the street. Anton, a great bear of a man with a lion's mane of hair, partly tamed by his bowler hat, and Andrei, shorter than Anton, but barrel-chested. These were good soldiers and strong men whose steady gazes concealed cunning and strategic minds, men with whom Nikolai had defended the city gates of Tianjin from the Boxer rebels who'd sought to stop the march of Russia's railways through China. But for what? Nikolai wondered now. To merely set the stage for Nicholas II's terrible defeat at the hands of the Japanese. How many humiliations would Russia be forced to endure before its true spirit rose once more to seize its fate? No more, Nikolai vowed. No more, and that is why we shall not proceed headlong into this great war to come. The men he greeted now could be trusted with the task before them. They fell silent as he opened the case and handed them each a jewel box one might use to encase a lady's diamond necklace. As they studied the stones and little chains curled within, Nikolai studied the men's faces, looked for signs of raw ambition or reckless wonder or anything else that might distract them from the momentous work at hand. He saw only cool calculation, and was calmed. Once this task is complete, my father will allow us to act, and not a moment too soon, he told them. But first, we must strike down all those with whom the archeologist might have shared the secret. He reached into his jacket pocket, removed the handwritten lists he'd prepared for them both. A list of names only. It would be up to them to do the rest. Both men read the list carefully. Julie Stratford, Mr. Reginald Ramsay, Elliot Saverall, Alex Saverall, Randolph Stratford, Samir Ibrahim. First, Nikolai added, all those who loved Lawrence Stratford must die. Part 1. 1. Brogden Castle. She was no stranger to war. She had walked the fields of many plagues through the centuries, offered healing and comfort to the mortals who lay dying there. She had borne witness to the fall of kingdoms, knew well the tastes and scents and sounds that split the air before a world was shattered by an apocalyptic storm. Beck-Tartan felt those things now. They rode the brisk ocean winds that swept her long walks atop the sea-facing cliffs. They drummed against the stone walls of the Norman castle she had so recently restored. They rose high above the English Channel, spun off by the thunderheads rolling over the German Empire. War was coming. But the reports from her spies throughout the world, her beloved heralds of the realms, had convinced her this cataclysm would have no precedent in history, and so her 8,000 years of immortal life could not prepare her for it. Cannons that could turn a battalion of soldiers to a sea of charnel would soon be rolled into battle. Machinery that once defied imaginations would service an interlocking web of conflict unlike any she'd ever seen. All the great nations of Europe would soon be embroiled. She could feel the coming thunder of it in her unbreakable bones. And so, she retired to her library, with its leather-bound volumes containing her ancient journals.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?